that was always my desire, to bring healing, encouragement, and strength to those that needed it whenever they, were in proximity to hear any of the sound waves that I was creating, on this cello.
Hello and welcome to Proud to Be You, the alumni podcast from Boston University. I'm your host, Jeff Murphy. Thank you very much for tuning in today. I love having a chance to hear the amazing career stories of our alumni, just like the person I'm speaking with today. If you like what we're doing with this show, I'll ask that you please just take 2 minutes to subscribe to our newsletter for bonus content and giveaways. You can do that now on our website at bu.edu/proudtobeyou. My guest today is celebrated cellist, composer, and inspiring storyteller Kendall Ramseur. After earning his master's degree from the BU College of Fine Arts, Kendall's journey spans from captivating audiences on the TV show America's Got Talent with the Billboard charting quartet Sons of Serendip to now with his extraordinary work in cinematic storytelling.
Proud to Be You showcases the journeys of some of Boston University's most interesting and accomplished alumni. Inspiring grads share the highs, the lows, and the challenges they've overcome along the way from comm to innovative careers. No matter where your path takes you, be proud to be you.
Well, Kendall, thanks so much for joining us on the Proud to Be You podcast. I am super excited to talk with you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I heard you say before that you grew up, and I think it was in North Carolina, that you grew up in a house just surrounded by music. As a music fan myself, I was wondering, do you have like an earliest memory of where like music just like moved you or like grabbed onto your soul in a way that you knew it was going to be a thing in your life?
That's a great question. So yes, definitely grew up in a home where music was just the soundtrack to life. There was I just remember waking up every morning and hearing my mom singing as she's making breakfast. The evenings are always very interesting. My dad has a little background in DJing. So he would have his music playing and some bongos and just kind of being there giving his own concert. Yeah, the home was always just full of music. I would probably say, ah man, what had the greatest impact? I started cello whenever I was 10 years old, and um, that particular year, I think I was probably in fifth grade. The elementary school I was attending took all the students to hear Yo-Yo Ma and the Charlotte Symphony Orchestra. So Yo-Yo Ma was performing, I think it was the Schumann Cello Concerto. And so you have all these 9, 10-year-olds in this hall, this performance hall, and you have this 90 to 100 piece orchestra there on the stage, every instrument that you can think of. And then you have Yo-Yo Ma who comes out. And knowing that I had just chosen the cello as my primary instrument, I was really, really excited to yeah, to kind of hear the instrument and like it being featured like with this sea of other instruments that look, some are small, some are big. It's just a really exciting moment. And I remember just seeing and hearing him perform that concerto, and just how he communicated with his instrument was something that really struck me and really resonated with me. As I looked around, the hall, there were people from, you know, different ethnicities, different walks of life, but everyone was moved. And everyone seemed as if they were following along with the story that he was telling. And I just thought it was just such a beautiful, beautiful experience, and one that I said, you know what, I want this to be a part of my life, forever.
One of the things we talk about a lot with guests on the podcast is the idea of in anybody's career, this idea that everybody has to make difficult choices, that there are decisions that need to be made in order to find your path. And I know you had told a story about deciding what you were going to study at college, and you got some great advice from, I think it was a private cello teacher that you had about whether or not you wanted to go and major in music or go to music school.
Right. Yeah, no, that was a very interesting conversation. So, during that time in my life, it was, when it came to choosing what I was going to major in, it was going to be between, music and computer engineering. At the time I was in a technology high school and learning how to, build computers, program computers. And I enjoyed it, but I during the programming portions, I noticed I was getting headaches. And so like it's like, what do I attribute that to, like, maybe the wrong prescription in my glasses or my contact? So I wasn't sure, but there was some discomfort that came with pursuing engineering. But my dad was all for it. He was like, well, that's what's going to pay your bills. When you think of the life of a musician, there are definitely seasons of great struggle. Um, and so during that time, I was also, as you mentioned, studying privately with a cello teacher, and she was a part of the Charlotte Symphony Orchestra. Um, and I had a conversation with her that sounded pretty much like this. Hey, I am trying to decide between music and engineering. What's in my heart, what my heart is telling me to do is to pursue music. I would love to hear your thoughts on the matter. I'd been coming into her studio every week, so she had heard me play. Um, and yeah, I was just very curious to hear what she thought, and I was shocked at her response. She said, "I actually don't recommend for you to go into music." And during that time, I was young and didn't quite understand, some of the struggles that musicians really face. Um, and so I was offended, and I was thinking, man, like, does she not think I'm good enough? So what's the story behind that? And she was just honest, and she shared, you know, how, many orchestras around the country, you know, the musicians are on strike, a lot of the time because, they don't have funding. They don't feel like they're being paid what they deserve. Um, and yeah, it's just a bit of a struggle. And so she said, I don't recommend that you pursue it, but, go home, think about it. And if you find that you really can't live without music, she said, then I would major in it. And so I went home and, just really worked through that, can I live without music, without playing and creating music? And came to the conclusion that I couldn't. So
I have to give a big shout out to a podcast called Superhumans.
Mm,
Were interviewed by the show. And as part of getting ready to chat with you today, I listened to this episode that you were featured on, and it was incredibly moving, had me tearing up in several different places, not just because of the story that you told, because the episode also features original compositions that you performed that were
mm,
amazing. So
uh,
part of that podcast interview, you told a story about being a, music student, and you had this, what sounds like a pretty foundational experience that I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about that really helped you solidify the idea that you were on the right path.
absolutely. Thank you for that, by the way, Jeff. Um, yes, my time at so during that, it was during my undergraduate studies at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, and just a beautiful school, some really amazing opportunities really rose while I was there. So how to connect this? So let's see here, man. This story is so rich. Uh, during my time there, we were fortunate enough to have Dr. Maya Angelou on the board um, of the university, and the chancellor of the school, by the name of John Mauceri, he's founder of the Hollywood Bowl.
Oh,
uh,
wow.
had just really he was a huge support to me while I was there. He took myself and another student to the Grammy Awards, where we had the opportunity to perform with artists that just had me floored whenever I heard that we would be
John
performing with them.
Legend and some other folks, right?
Yeah, yeah, John Legend. Uh, let's see, there was Herbie Hancock, there was Long Long, there was Alicia Keys. I mean, there were six different artists, and I was the principal cellist of the cello section there. So it's just really I had some really amazing opportunities, but one that really stood out to me was the opportunity to perform for Dr. Maya Angelou. So, she was celebrating, I think it was her 80th birthday. And, I'm also a composer. So I had written a solo cello piece for her called How Far I've Come. And it was pretty much my story of, it was just my story from the beginning to where I was at the moment. It expressed mountaintop experiences and valley experiences. So it really told a story. And so I wrote this piece for her, shared with the chancellor that, have this piece. I would love to perform it for her if possible. Um, Next thing I knew, he had reached out. I received a call from her folks, and stating that she had invited me over for tea. And so I was blown away by this, and yeah, I mean, I just read so much of her material, and um, yeah, man, she just really been such a blessing to me, throughout the years. And so I jumped in my car, with my cello and headed over to her home. I was living in Winston-Salem, North Carolina at the time, and she lived about 15 minutes from me, which was a huge surprise. So, I went in. She was there, and her niece was there. They greeted me just such a warm space. And they invited me to sit down. My chancellor was there, and I sat down and we just talked. Every word was just laced with so much wisdom. And even though it was my first time being in that space, it just felt so much like home. And that's just a beautiful thing about how she moved in the world. Um, so yes, I performed this piece, and it's very emotional for everyone. It's emotional for me. It was emotional for, there were a few tears that fell from her eyes, and and we just it really just had a very special moment. And she later told me stories and sung, and after we kind of wrapped up our time, we hugged, and it was just so special. And I started walking out, and her niece walked me out. And one of the things that she said to me that man really solidified my mission. She said that, Kendall, while you were playing, there were parts of me being healed that I didn't know needed healing. And that meant so much because that was always my desire, to bring healing, encouragement, and strength to those that needed it whenever they, were in proximity to hear any of the sound waves that I was creating, on this cello. And to hear her express what that experience was like for her, just really, really affirmed and confirmed that in my journey. So yeah,
And
it was.
so after that experience, or even when you're in North Carolina, you've already sort of decided, like, I am going to make a career out of this. This is going to be what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. I devoted so much time to it. During that time I was practicing, man, I was probably practicing around 8 hours a day, and the cello was more, it was, I don't know, it was a very therapeutic type of you know, thing for me. Yeah, when I was younger, I dealt with a lot of anxiety and fear. And so whenever I would go to the cello, that was a way. And I should also add, while working and dealing with the anxiety and the fear, I didn't always know how to articulate it with words. And so that's where the cello came in. I didn't have to use words. I could just play out what I was feeling, and the emotions that I was experiencing. And uh, it was very therapeutic for me. So, um, yeah, so I knew by that point that yes, I didn't know exactly what it would look like, but I knew it would be music.
You, this is something I've been wanting to ask you. You mentioned you were practicing 8 hours a day. I'm guessing that's in addition to classes and other responsibilities that you have, even as a student. Do you think, knowing what you know now, do you think that anyone can be an accomplished musician if they spend enough time on it, if they're willing to do that work, put in the 8 hours a day of additional practice, the study, um, or is there something, that you need to be born with in terms of talent?
Hmm. Wow. I think that's a really great question. Um, that's a really great question. I do believe there are some that are born with it. I do believe that I was one of those. That there was something that came uh, very naturally to me. Um, but just because it comes naturally, it doesn't mean you can like slack, like you can, some concerto can be sat before you. You're just gonna, it still took and takes a lot of hard work, a lot of practice. Um, but I think I've met folks on both ends, those that it didn't always come naturally, but they had such a desire for it that they worked and they've turned out to be just fabulous musicians and artists. And then those that, it came somewhat naturally for, that have fabulous, careers. And then some that didn't because, because it came naturally, they kind of, skipped out on, or, decided not to practice as much as they could have, and they missed really amazing opportunities. So I think there you will find folks on both ends of the spectrum there. Um,
So tell me how you ended up in Boston. You came up to the College of Fine Arts to do a master's program. I'm curious to know why the master's program and why BU? How did you end up here?
Yeah, no. So let's see here, going back those years. So I think during that time, there were several schools that I was auditioning for, and I should say even before that, once I received my bachelor's, I think it just felt like it was just the natural progression, like to go for, excuse me, your master's degree. Um, and there's definitely more opportunities that depending on the path that you're choosing to take, there are more opportunities that are opened up to you whenever you receive your master's, especially around like teaching. For me, that transition between my bachelor's and my master's, I wasn't 100% sure of what like that ultimate goal was going to be. So I didn't know if I would, one day be a professor, of music or you know, audition and join some symphony. Um, but I knew that if with either of those, going for my master's would just set me up better. That was my opinion on the matter. Um, so I said yes, I will go and get my master's. And so, as I said, there were several schools that I auditioned for, and um, the first round of auditions for me actually were not good. Was not a part of that. I auditioned for like two schools, and there was a huge setback that yeah, it just was a part of my journey. But during that setback, I really, worked hard to kind of jump back on that horse. Once I got back on the horse, at that particular year, I took a year off. When I came back and re-auditioned for, a list of schools, I got into all of them. Um, but my cello professor at UNCSA kind of gave me a lay of the land, just sharing this school is known for this. These are some of the popular teachers there, the well-known teachers there. And so BU was one of those schools that he mentioned, and he spoke very highly of Mark Johnson, who was a former member of the Vermeer quartet. So I just very much respected my cello professor and his opinions and suggestions. And so I did some research on Mark and um, you know, just great things that I read, and there was some things that spoke to his character and just how he approached music. It was just I felt like it was the perfect fit. So that's actually what brought me here. I auditioned, had a lesson with him that just went extremely well. Um, got into the school, and the rest was history. So
One of the things I love to ask guests about is what their life was like at BU, sort of beyond the classroom. So, where were you living at the time? Where were you
Mhm.
hanging out when you weren't practicing or,
Yeah.
going to working with professors? What were some of the fun memories that stand out in your mind about your time at BU?
Maybe you. Wow. So yeah, so I was living so I was there from a master's program, and so I was actually living in Cambridge. So I would cross the bridge every day to get to class. And I thoroughly enjoyed my time in Cambridge. Um, you know, as far as the places that I would hang out, one thing with when you're in grad school that's very different from when you're in undergrad is that you don't spend as much time on campus. Uh, many times you don't even live on campus. So you have like one foot in like the the university or conservatory world, and then the other is like out in the real world, which I think it's a really healthy, like combination of the two. But when I was on campus, I would spend, time at the GSU, grabbing some food. Um, I was a part of the Inner Strength Gospel Choir with Herbert Jones. So I would spend some time at Mars Chapel, which actually really kicked off my career in a very interesting way, just with some of the contacts that I made while I was there. Uh, so yeah, GSU. Where else did I go? There was a Chinese restaurant down the street called Victoria's. Man, the food was like so cheap, but for a school, a student, it was just perfect. It fit right in the budget. So I would head down there to grab lunch from time to time. Um, yeah, just on up and down Commonwealth Ave.
One of the things that I love that we're doing with this season of the podcast is we've actually invited some of our community members to ask a question. And we've
Hmm.
got your fellow CFA alum, a wonderful person named Lizzie, who's got a question for you about your BU experience.
Hi, I'm Lizzie Rich. I am a CFA alumni from 2014, and my question is, what skills that you learned at BU do you use in your everyday life and job that maybe you forgot that you actually learned at BU?
Great question. I would say managing my time. Um, yeah, I would say managing my time between now this is seasonal, but managing my time based off of the projects that are bringing in income and those that aren't. Um, it's wonderful whenever you can have a job that you love and that is also lucrative. But there are times when you have to supplement because just things aren't quite adding up at that moment. So I would say, yeah, definitely managing my time, when it comes to different projects that you decide to take on or not take on. And I would also say, um, being in grad school, because you kind of have one, as I said before, one foot in, the school world and another in like the real world, it definitely you're kind of forced to grow up. You have to get a job and in some capacity. Yeah, those are the two things that I would say.
This April, join Boston University for Global Days of Service, a month of volunteer opportunities bringing alumni together to make a difference in our local communities across the globe. Join a volunteer group or start your own project at bu.edu/Global Days of Service.
So you mentioned when you're talking about inner strength that you made some connections that really helped launch your career. Are we talking about the Sons of Serendip?
Wow. So it's so like there's so many layers to this thing, but
Right.
Sons of Serendip kind of was a byproduct as well of Inner Strength Gospel Choir. But even before the Sons of Serendip, it was Inner Strength Gospel Choir that really launched my solo career that took place before the Sons.
Got it.
So I there was another student within the choir who just randomly one day went and on YouTube and listened to some of my music, and she was just very moved by it. And she knew of someone that would actually sponsor up and coming artists on, like projects. So it might be recording an album or a music video. And so she shared some of my material with him, and he was very excited and wanted to really support me in that way. And so this was probably right in between my first and second year at BU. We were connected, and he said he wanted to sponsor my first original album and music video. And I'd never done anything like that before, but it was something that really resonated with me, and I knew would be fulfilling because all the songs that I wrote and recorded would be, I mean, they were original, so it would just be my story straight to you know um, to this album. And so recorded that album, created a band, toured in the New England area, won a Boston Music Award. And then whenever that season, my solo career kind of was transitioning out, the Sons of Serendip kind of birthed. The interesting thing with the Sons of Serendip, three of us had affiliations with the Inner Strength Gospel Choir at different times. But there were moments where three of us were able to come together for one of the concerts and play a selection. We had no idea that Sons of Serendip would be birthed. But yeah, Inner Strength Gospel Choir, it was a very special community, and a special place for me because, as I said, just so much birthed out of that choir.
And that's still true for so many other alumni, and that's an organization that I think will be here at the university for a long time to come. So we mentioned Sons of Serendip, and that's a quartet that the university has been rooting for as a whole for a long time. But is it just a rocket ship? Tell us about America's Got Talent and what happens.
Yeah, no, it's a crazy experience. So how this all took place, so while I was living in Cambridge, I had two other roommates, one by the name of Cordero Rodriguez. We grew up together in North Carolina, and Mason Morton, harpist. We were at BU in the School of Music together. And so solo career was wrapping up. I received a call from Cordero, and he said, "Hey, Micah, who's the lead singer of Sons of Serendip," and I had gotten to know, within my last year at BU. Said Micah reached out, and I was curious if you would be willing to create this group to audition for America's Got Talent. Now this came out of nowhere, and so I'm thinking to myself, like what, like. I guess, and it kind of flowed naturally because, as I said, my solo career was kind of coming to an end. And an end to how it was being done. You know, I could of course could have continued, but I was dealing with some burnout. Um, and so I told him, I said, well, you know, that's very interesting request. But sure, you know, we can do this. And so we created this group, and so we had lead vocal, cello, piano, and harp. All of us were at BU. And so, you know, we were going into the school every day almost, uh, trying to create arrangements of these songs that were fresh and new, but that when you would hear the song, you would say, "Oh wow, like I know this song, but it's done in such a way that it feels almost like a completely different song, but you still, still some a resemblance to the original." So we were going in, we were practicing, we would go and, go to, some of us were working, we would go and work, and then we would go back to the school, and we were in there probably until 2, 3 a.m., trying to work on these songs. We would send them to the producers on America's Got Talent. They would say, this is beautiful, but, let's try this song. We think it will fit best with the demographic that watched the show. So there was this back and forth. And, during the process, I have to be honest, I wasn't like, extremely excited, and I think because I didn't quite understand, I was a little, I don't know if I was a little aloof, but there was something I was missing, some connecting piece. And I could, every time we would go and practice, I would see in the guys, they would kind of be looking at me like, like, I wonder, like, is Kendall like on board? Is he not? Like, they couldn't quite read me. And so we were doing this for several weeks. And eventually one of the guys, they said, tomorrow, Kendall, we're going to be in New York, for the show. They invited us in. And I sat there and I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then I started really thinking about it. And I was like, wait a minute, New York. I was like, where at in New York? And they were like, oh, at Madison Square Garden. And then I was thinking, wait, Madison Square. And now during that time, I was like I don't tell many people this, but I was a huge Justin Bieber fan. And I think he had just performed at Madison Square Garden. And so I started connecting the dots. I was like, wait a minute, like, guys, this is really big, And like, I just had this moment, and they were like, yeah, Kendall, like, this is really big, and we were like worried, like you weren't like excited. I was like, whoa. And so I kind of came to my senses. And so, we had that moment. It was really, really fun. We still laugh about it, to this day. But we went to New York the next day, I had my cello and the harp and all of this. And, we get on, we're backstage, we're talking with Nick Cannon. And then he sends us out to, on stage. Now, the judges during that time was Howard Stern. He's also a BU alum. There was Mel B, there was Howie Mandel, there was Heidi Klum. And I think that was all four. And so right when we go on stage, there was thunderous applause. And we were kind of looking around like, what is this about? And I think it was a very interesting and inspiring sight. You have these very unique instruments that you only see in, like the classical world, but now you're seeing it in a more like contemporary space. We're all brothers of color. So it was just a very, it was something that you don't necessarily see every day, I guess. And so there was immediate support and a warmth that we felt from everyone in that space. There were a few thousand people. And so we played and we performed somewhere only we know by Keane. And there were tears. There was the room was filled with a lot of emotion. And there was, after the performance, there was thunderous applause and 4 thumbs up from the judges. And so we were a little bit in a daze after that, because we were thinking, as a group, all 4 of us, we had never performed together before. I didn't know how the other guys were going to stand under that type of pressure. And 2 of them weren't even from the music school, but still were very passionate about music and had, music had been a part of their lives for many years. So we got off stage, and we were backstage talking with Nick again, and I was still kind of like, whoa, like that really happened, and we found out they invited us back the next week and the next week and the next week, and after a few weeks, we looked at each other as a group and we said like, are we doing this? Like this is happening, and like, what happens after the show? Like, are we going to continue to be a group? And I think after so many rounds, like progressing through so many rounds, we came to the conclusion that we would. And so, we made it all the way to the finals. There was, several months we were living in New York, performing at Radio City Music Hall each week. And it was just such um, an amazing experience.
Was it a surprise? It sounds like, I mean, it was unexpected. There's an interesting story in here about just sort of like taking opportunities as they arise. But you go on, again, finalist on America's Got Talent. You
Yeah.
are recording albums that are charting on the Billboard charts, playing with
Yeah.
symphonies, you're touring the country, TV appearances.
Yeah.
This is all, is it a surprise to you?
Yeah, it was a huge surprise, as you said, none of us were expecting this. But when it happened, it was like, whoa, like, as I said earlier, like I always knew music would be, I was going to make a career out of music. I didn't know it would take the form of a quartet. And not just a quartet, but reaching a place where it's like nationally acclaimed and like people all around the world know you. I didn't necessarily know that. So that was a surprise, but a beautiful one.
And as you're telling me about how the group came together, it's got me thinking about how um, artistic partnerships, artistic collaborations. I'm curious if you think that they are extremely different from other sort of more traditional workplace collaborations. Like I'm
Hmm.
constantly collaborating with teammates and things like that. But and that question leads me to, if it's okay, I'd like to ask about your decision to leave this very
Hmm.
successful surprise group in 2023. You're no longer with Sons of Serendip. What can you tell me about all of that?
Yeah. Great questions. I would say partnerships in this form are very different um, than like traditional
Working in
work.
an office, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
I work in an
absolutely.
office. Okay, yeah.
Absolutely. It's very different. It's not just, these guys are my coworkers. It becomes these guys are family. Like these guys are my brothers because, you have to realize you're together almost 24/7, especially, when things, once we got off the show, we signed with IMG artists. They were booking our tours, and, we were touring extensively throughout the United States and then internet and later internationally. So I mean, you're around each other all the time, So it's very different. You learn how to support one another under very stressful situations. Performing for millions of people is not easy, and especially in this day and age where every moment is captured and tweeted or and so you're having to make sure that you're on like all the time. But one thing that really helps is just being able to be yourself, your authentic self, not trying to be something that you're not. Um, so yeah, it's very different. It's you're always being sharpened, because you're fortunately with our group, we were always just striving to be better humans, so you're constantly being sharpened. You're learning how to work through challenges with one another, how to collaborate, understanding that your opinion is not always the best opinion, so that was very, very, very helpful. um so yes, man, Jeff, that was a really big question. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm hitting on everything. So yes, so it's very different. Now, you're also correct. I did have to step down from the group. Um, that was probably hmm, that was probably one of the hardest decisions of my life. You know, you're with a group of brothers that, have performed on, you performed on national television several times. Um, you know, you've seen some of the most beautiful sights together. You sat on, at the edge of a canyon. You've ridden camels and four-wheelers and had dinner in the middle of the Red Desert in Dubai. While you're representing the United States, regards artistically at the World Expo. Um, you've opened up for John Legend. You've been invited by Oprah Winfrey, to perform at her end of tour party. Um, you've laughed together, you've cried together. It was a very, very hard decision, but one that I knew that I was going to have to make at some point in time. My wife and I, we had our first son, just beautiful, beautiful son. And, when we had him, I was in and out of touring. I was actually that particular year, I was away from home more than I was home. And it was just so hard for me to see him doing new things and then knowing that I wasn't there when it first took place. So I was missing a lot of the milestones. And then my wife and I had our second son. It was just like, wait, this is this is way too much. And just emotionally, I was there was just a lot. I was unhealthy because even though we were having these amazing opportunities and I loved every moment of it, there was another big part of me that was wanting to be home. And so I had to make that very hard decision. And it was one that was understood by the rest of the group as much as it could be. I was the only one that had kids at the time. And I really appreciated that. But it was definitely a very, very hard decision.
So funny, as I was thinking about asking you that question earlier, I had been looking at your Instagram account and I was like, oh, that's why. You
Yeah.
care a lot about
Yeah.
your family. I've seen these two boys, and I've got two small boys at home myself. I was like, oh,
Oh,
I knew it was going to lead there. But
yeah.
I mean, it makes so much sense to me then that any professional, not just a touring artist, but any professional has to make these balancing decisions about family and professional goals. And so now you've pivoted into doing some really cool back to the solo work where you've got maybe a little bit more control over the artistic direction. And
Yeah.
so tell us, and you also founded your own sort of production company, I think, in the last
Mhm.
year. So tell us about that process
Yeah.
and in particularly with that, you're in this very successful quartet. You decided to do your own thing. How are
Yeah.
you? How are you now again balancing your artistic goals with your desire to make money and support a family?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, it actually has been a beautiful transition. But within beauty, we know there's there's super challenging times and then very like smooth and beautiful. So it's all of beauty encompasses all of that. And many times you don't see that until later on, down the road. But no, you're absolutely right. I founded my own production company. Composition has always been a huge passion for me, as I shared earlier. And it's, you know, we're talking solo work, solo cello pieces, all the way to large symphonic works. And it's more composition along the lines of music that could be used for film, so like film scoring, or just composing for media. Um, and so that's what I focused on when I transitioned out of the group. There were opportunities that were coming my way, which led me to founding this production company. We're getting opportunities to score for Netflix, to do some other compose for other forms of media. And it was just amazing because I could do it all from the comfort of my home. It's like, I just go up to my studio and, pull out the cello and some mics, or, these days, a lot of composers, if you don't have access to and the funds for, to hire a symphony, you have some other options there with, is East West or Hollywood Strings or Hollywood Brass, which they go and they take these orchestras and they record in these well-known halls. And they then assign, they have these orchestras. Man, it's tedious work, but play every note and hear the little nuances and the transitions between the notes, and you assign it to a MIDI key. And so you're able to play these beautiful orchestrations from the comfort of your home and with a keyboard. So that's just kind of where we are today. And so yeah, the transition has been pretty smooth, and I've been just very fortunate and grateful for the projects that I've been able to work on. They've grown me as a composer, as a cellist, and it's also been a way that I've been able to give back. Receiving that feedback of how my music has touched and healed, which has always been a part of my mission. It's just so encouraging and so fulfilling. So yeah, the story continues.
Yeah. I was listening to some of the work that you did for a podcast. Is the podcast called Exodus, or is that?
Yeah. So man, that was a massive project, but it's called Holy Ghost Stories, but the particular season was the Exodus. And it was for season 4 of their release. There were a total of 10 episodes, and each episode was 30 minutes. So it's over 300 minutes of original music. That was probably my most ambitious project, and I was probably crazy to take it on, but I'm so grateful that I did. Um, but yeah, it really just has a lot of beautiful fruit has been produced from that, and folks from all around the country have written in, just sharing how that season has impacted them. Another beautiful thing about that is that because of the well-received the great reviews, we've actually begin to take that on the road. And we're actually doing a tour this April, where we're taking the last 2 episodes of that season, and we've created a live version of it. And I think we're starting in North Carolina and moving ourselves west, for audiences around the country. So excited about that.
Well, I'm going to get the dates from you. We'll make sure to put those in the show notes so that people can.
Absolutely.
Or a Boston date. I want to come.
Ooh, I don't know if we
Yeah,
come up north, but
fair enough.
if we can make that happen. Yeah.
Kendall, I've already taken so much more of your time than I intended to today, but we didn't even talk. I loved you had a solo album in 2020 that I thought was outstanding. Is it Selah? Is that how you pronounce it?
Selah, yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Which means to pause. Absolutely.
People need to check that out. But where do you want our listeners to engage with your work? Certainly you've got a website, but where do you want people to go to listen to more of the things that you've been doing?
Yeah. No, I would say my website, kendallramseur.com. I have a lot of my music there, but also on Spotify and Apple Music. Yeah, I think most of my work is there. Last year, I released 10 albums, which it was crazy, but it was as a result of the podcast that I scored. So each one of those episodes, I released the soundtrack to those. So a lot of music to listen to. Working on a new solo cello album, so keep your ears out for that. And Jeff, if I could, I just took on a new role. This is something I think will really be something that the Boston area needs. But there's a new music center that's opening up in Malden, Mass. That I'm one of 3 co-founders of and the music director of. It's called Soundgrove Community Studios. So we're opening up late summer, early fall of this year. 12,000 square feet of space, state-of-the-art facility. We'll have a state-of-the-art recording studio, a music school, beautiful rehearsal spaces, some that can accommodate orchestras. But that's like my new venture.
That's incredible. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So I'll just keep an eye out on my site, and I'll have more information on that. But uh, the mission and the goal is to kind of get rid of this narrative that if you're going to be a musician, you have to really struggle through it financially, within, so that starving artist type thing, so with music, with Sound Grove, we're and how everything is being set up is really providing opportunities for musicians, and artists, throughout the state to make a solid income and living, doing what they love. So really, really excited about that initiative.
Well, Kendall, this was it was really a joy to get to talk with you, and I have to say you've made at least one new fan. I'm
Oh,
subscribing to your newsletter. I'm listening to your stuff, and I promise you the next time you're performing in Boston, I'll be there. But thank you for taking the time to chat with me today.
thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again to Kendall for joining me on the podcast. I have been telling everybody in my life to make sure to listen to his work. Specifically, I want all of you to check out the award-winning podcast Superhumans that Kendall was featured on, where he also composed the original score for the episode. Between the storytelling and the music, I don't mind saying I was tearing up. It was incredibly moving. On that note, stay here for a few more minutes because thankfully Kendall's agreed to share a clip from a recent performance he did in front of a live audience of over 800 people. Before Kendall plays us out, if listening to his performance makes you proud to be you, and I know it will, I hope that you'll join me in making a gift to the BU cause that matters to you most at bu.edu/give.
Sing this with you. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now, oh, I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Ooh,
Thanks for listening to Proud to Be You. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your episodes. Proud to Be You podcast is produced by Boston University and our partners 5 Tool Productions, a BU alumni-owned, Boston-based company specializing in video production, live streaming, and content marketing. Our theme from Artist.io is Think About Lights by Ben Fox. All additional media in this episode has been shared by our guest. To learn more about Proud to Be You, visit bu.edu/proud to be you.